Attending. Okay.
Are you recording it now? Okay.
I didn't record it. I just joined as an attendee.
Okay. I'll try to clean up my language then.
Nice logo behind you.
Yeah. Eric is going to join.
Oh, good. Are you hearing me through the computer or are you just hearing me through the phone?
I'm only hearing you through the phone because you're a participant and attendee,
Okay,
but I can allow you to talk. I'd hit the allow to talk.
just figured. I just want to make sure that they weren't going to be able to talk while you talk. Did you put all the resources up on the site or no?
Yeah, it is. It's all on the site. Did I not share that?
It didn't say that in the email that I saw.
Okay. Let me get that out real quick.
In your slides, you have Jason.
I erased that one, or I didn't erase it. I hid it. So
Okay, good.
okay, posts. All right, let's see.
Steven said he didn't receive. He was going to come to the.
He was.
And he's saying he doesn't have the credentials, and I'm like, you've received an email like 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah.
From Zoom. Yeah, I will send it to you. Okay.
All right, where is it on here? Where's my link? Permalink. Oops.
What hour?
Still don't have anybody else join besides you.
Really, it sounded like someone had just joined. Just made a sound. Oh, did you send out a message or something?
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and hang out and start
Great.
getting things going on my.
That's good.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, bye. All right, we got 3 minutes. So Eric, you remember the old arc serve recovery that we had to do at I'm not going to publicly announce the business name, but going back to, what was it, like 2000 with our largest client back at the time? That was the one where I was there all night long in Fountain Valley.
I try not to remember those things, but I do have flashbacks of pain and misery.
Yeah, in particular with ArcServe and all those old backup programs back in the day, they were quite miserable.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's just an absolute nightmare, and many hours of our time and many hours in lost productivity for our clients' time.
Yeah. That was a seminal moment, I think, for me back in it had to have been 2001, I think, somewhere around there.
I remember spending 3 days solid at a data center in the late 90s.
Oof.
Never left.
Tell me more about that.
That was when we lost a hosting server or two.
Ouch.
At OCO. It was brutal.
What was the backup software you were using at the time?
I think it was Backup Exec.
Yeah.
But
Backup Exec used to give me nightmares. I used to literally not be able to sleep when I was worried about a client's servers.
well, I brought a pillow and a blanket into the cold data center in Tustin.
I'm sorry, I don't even know that story. That's awful.
And you wonder why I hate going to the data center.
Yeah. No, I don't wonder that at all. I relate. It is not a perfect place. So
Not built for humans.
it is not built for humans, for sure. All right, let's see. How many people we got in there? All right, let's wait a minute more or so before we get started. And we can tell other stories. Which was the big earthquake in LA? It was about, I don't know, 25 years ago or something like that. Don't recall what the name of it was. And
The what now?
the earthquake that happened like 25 years ago, something like that.
Flint Ridge, I think.
Somewhere, I don't, doesn't sound right, but anyway. You remember where you were? Oh, Northridge.
Northridge, yeah. I was in Hawaii.
Oh, I was out of town too.
No, I was living in
I've always
Hawaii.
kind of joked that there's never an earthquake when I'm in town. It always seems to happen when I'm traveling or away. So I'll knock on wood for that one in particular. So at that point in time, don't think we had anything specifically business wise that was related.
I don't think we were in business.
Yeah, 25 years ago we were not in business, but we were in the industry. So
That Flint Ridge was that was like 1993. I was scuba instructing in Hawaii. I just learned about bulletin boards at that point.
All right. So people are rolling in. That's always a good sign. Nobody on time. All right. I figured might as well get started on this as well. This is being recorded, so everybody know that. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Welcome everybody to Zephyr Networks. It's our webinar on business continuity and disaster recovery planning. We're going to be talking about building those plans and kind of the steps to go about when you're doing that. It's a critical component to your business continuity and resilience. We have a whole bunch of documentation, and we'll put the link, if we haven't already, in the chat for reference material. It's available on our website. A lot of this comes from sources that are FEMA or California state related. I think you'll find that it's a good set of materials in there, and we'll go over some of those in the short time we have available to us now. I just put that in the chat for everybody. A quick agenda. We'll talk a little bit about history and examples. If you were waiting for Jason McNew, he's not able to make it today, but Eric and I have been through quite a bit in this world and have lots of history and examples to reference. We'll talk a little bit about the risks to your business. We'll talk about what is a business continuity plan and what is a disaster recovery plan and how they're a little different. We'll talk about some of the steps in the IT disaster recovery and questions you should be asking, and a little bit more about the business continuity part of it. And we'll talk a little bit about how your team fits in to the mix, the people involved in your organization and us, and how we fit into that whole mix of people. So the lessons from the past events that stand out in particular, and I didn't put in there the recent one in Turkey, but the ones that came into my mind was the Tahuki earthquake and tsunami in Japan in 2011. I think you'll find that the business resilience in Japan was really strong after that. They suffered crushing effects from that. A lot of people passed, but by and large, as a business resilience example, it's a good example. There are lots of examples aside from Fukushima that showed how strong their business planning and disaster recovery planning is. And then there was Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana in 2005. And one of the reasons I brought that up is there are a number of really good examples of companies that did have business continuity plans and disaster recovery plans, and they were able to be back at work within a week of the event. And so one example in particular, they had the ability to get to like a WeWork type of place in Houston. So they came together in Houston. They had all their data restored from the cloud. At that point in time, they were cloud backed up, and that was an early adopter at that point in time in 2005. And they were back to work in a week. So those are good examples. There's sure plenty of bad examples in there. The risks are downtime is expensive. The average cost, it's been estimated for a small business, is $1,410 per minute of downtime. Now that's a small business estimate. It's really expensive. 40% of small businesses never reopen, according to FEMA. And that's something that affects everybody who's listening to this. Backup alone is not enough. For years, we just did backup, and that was, sufficient because we weren't thinking about the risks of a major disaster quite like we do now, and we didn't have the resources we have now to help make sure that a business stays in business during that time. The technologies around business continuity have improved a lot. Disasters do not conform to plans. So the plans that you make need to be a little bit loose enough to adjust, and you need to have the people around you who can adjust so that the business will be available to be restored and stay in business. And your customers all around the world will be able to get the products or the services you offer. And it's critical to business survival based on the statistic above. 40% of small businesses never reopen. Don't let that be yours. All right, potential risks to consider. And I put this image up there after it snowed in Hollywood a few weeks back. I thought it was hilarious. If anyone remembers that, the day after tomorrow, I thought it was apt. Gave me a good laugh. But in Southern California, we need to think about earthquakes. We need to be prepared for earthquakes, wildfires. Floods and mudslides are also a problem here. I actually read something just recently when I was doing research for this project that hurricanes can actually hit California. I don't think it's a #1 risk. The ice and snow was sort of the joke around the day after tomorrow for those of you who've seen it. Part of the things that we're thinking about here in a disaster can be theft, cybercrime, and data corruption. Specifically on the cybercrime one, if you don't have an incident response plan, you need to build one. You'll want to look at our webinar that we did in January based on incident response planning. And that's available on the Zephyr Networks a YouTube channel. You can just go on YouTube and look up Zephyr Networks, and I'll have a link for you if you want that as well.
Another risk, Mark, that we have to be concerned with is rain. In Southern California, every time it rains, there's either an internet outage, a power outage, flooding, just typical stuff that's going to stop your business.
Yeah. And when it rains here, then we get the storm alert all over the whole city, the whole Southern California shuts down. So what are the odds of this actually happening? Well, the rain obviously is pretty high, but the odds of a major earthquake, a magnitude 7 or higher, is 75% in a 30-year period beginning in 2014. I got that information from the California Earthquake Authority. I think that if there's any reason why a plan is important to you, that number should be striking. There's a magnitude, or is a greater than 99 chance of 1 or more magnitude 6.7 or greater earthquake striking California. So it's definitely a high probability, and we need to be prepared for it as a community, really. So we're doing our best to help the community here. So when we talk about business community continuity versus a disaster recovery plan, the two of them are often combined, but they have separate objectives. The business continuity plan is really about the larger business at whole, what their business objectives are, what their inventories are available and where they're stored, process mapping, business risks and impact analysis, like what if we lose this, what's the impact? If we can't do this, what's the impact on that? So the business continuity strategy development is a different kind of mode than it is with the disaster recovery mode, specifically related to the IT side of it. And then the business continuity plan includes the testing and the acceptance of everybody in your team, and then updating it and maintaining that. The disaster recovery plan is a little bit more IT focused, at least the way that we practice it. It focuses on the inventory of the programs that you're using, the applications, the hardware, the data connectivity, which if you imagine that is an important part of it because everything is in the cloud nowadays. That data connectivity is probably a higher priority than some of the other items that you do on a daily basis. IT strategy development as well, the disaster recovery strategy, and it's part of that plan, and contingency planning, as well as testing of the data restore and auditing that, making sure every backup is restorable and maintenance is available. All right. Okay, so the plans combined together kind of come down to this outline, I guess. The first part is to prepare and anticipate. And you being here at this event is preparing and anticipating the potential risks. The next steps include documenting essential business functions, identifying the biggest threats, which we've already discussed. Your office may be next to a river or some flood basin or near wildfire areas. And so when you're preparing in that level, you need to consider those as well for your specific business. And then you're going to want to support your key stakeholders, identify your key suppliers, vendors, partners, and customers, and identify if they're also going to be able to provide the tools, the products, the software that you need to use to keep going. And that could be cloud providers like Microsoft or, any of your cloud ERP solutions. Might be good to check in on, know that their backup and disaster recovery plans are in place as well, and what would happen in a major event. So you want to talk to those teams and those companies as you build your business continuity plan. Training and caring for employees is an important part of it. Your team needs to be trained on what your disaster recovery and your business continuity plan is. If they don't know what's going on, or if you don't know how to communicate with them, that's going to be a huge problem. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in this presentation as well. Securing and protecting. So you're going to want to assess the facilities you're in, the buildings, where your data room is, what could possibly go wrong in those data rooms, how much battery backup time you have, and what would happen if you lost power or internet. A lot of times we'll recommend people get a 5G or similar wireless connection for their internet connection as a backup. And that is partially motivated by the idea that they'll still want to have that continuity, that communication link available, the internet, for their business. And then not everything is going to be
what? Inexperienced backhoe can cause a disaster for your company too.
Yeah.
So the wireless
We've seen that.
redundancy helps a lot.
Yeah, absolutely does. The mobile broadband stuff is a lot more functional now to do the critical elements, and having an SD-WAN solution is definitely a good solution. Safeguarding data and vital documents. Not everything is going to be in a digital format, but you want to make sure that those things, either digital or non-digital, have been safeguarded. The things that will help you stay in business, with bank accounts, things like that. And then you're going to adapt and recover once it's happened and you've kind of restored. You're going to adapt. Maybe you'll move into a different building. Maybe you'll maybe you'll be able to review finances with your bank or your FEMA or somebody like that to come back. But the other thing in the plan in particular you're going to want to do is reassess it, because things will change. And so they recommend you reassessing it at regular intervals. And the source that I got these plans from is actually our tax dollars at work here in California. It's a really excellent plan. I went through a lot of business continuity and disaster recovery plans. But the source here, and it's linked in on the webpage that I referenced in the chat, is it's the outsmartdisaster.calosba.ca.gov. I highly recommend you doing their challenge to see if your company has a plan in place and what you're going to do. So there's, I guess, somebody trying to join. Carol's trying to get in there. So anyway, all right. So moving forward, the disaster recovery plan in particular. And so this graphic is directly from the plan that we have uploaded and on the link in the chat session. So it's defining the parts of the IT disaster recovery plan where you're going to be restoring, establishing communications, finding an alternate business site. So what would happen if your building is red tagged? We know from experience that a lot of the clients that we have don't really have a plan for this. And so a critical component of your IT recovery plan is going to be what happens if you can't get into your building? What happens if you can't even get out of your house? Or is your team going to be working from their homes, if that's even available? Or is your team going to be meeting at at some other location? Or are you going to all meet at Starbucks? I have one experience where there was a fire at a building that a client was in, and this is already 20 years ago. And they ended up restoring their system and onto a new server and working from the owner's garage. And that kept them in business for probably 2 months while their building was brought back into a running position. It was definitely an interesting story, and it worked really well for them. Actually, they actually enjoyed working from the garage. They got a lot done in there, but it was a super small business and it wouldn't work for everybody. The connectivity problem we talked about earlier. How are you going to reestablish connectivity? And this is where an appliance, a service like Datto or similar services like it make a big deal, because as long as you have some sort of internet connection and you have your system backed up with a Datto or other BCDR appliance that is backed up to the cloud, we have the ability to bring that up and running and allow people access to it securely via a virtual private network. So an important part of the plan is to ask the big questions like where will the employees be, or they'll be used different alternate location. And then for your whole business and the business continuity plan, production, inventory, can that all be moved? Can it be put into a different site? How would that go about? How would that be done? And does it make sense to do it here in Southern California or somewhere outside of that? Perhaps something like Nevada or wherever you happen to be. If you're watching this, you might be in Alabama and you might need to move inland somewhere. So those are important questions to be part of the IT disaster recovery plan. Eric, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just want to make sure, where your employee is going to be able to do work and where is your data going to be if it's not available in the primary locations, right? And how those people are going to get access from those separate locations to the separate locations of your data. Yep,
that's the important questions there. So recovery plan phases. Basically, it breaks out into 4 phases, and this kind of defines the activities necessary to recover from any kind of major disruption like this. The first one is the actual disaster itself, and that's the phase with the actual event. And then at some point in time, you're going to say, okay, let's activate this recovery plan. If you have this recovery plan, hopefully it will exist in forms, multiple places, both digital and hard copies in folders. Apparently there's a few people trying to get into this meeting. Hold on a second here.
But that's a really good point, is that you want to have a hard copy of your disaster recovery program, right? Because if there is a disaster and you can't get to your digital assets, what are you going to fall back on? That's the same thing with security, right? There's an incident response plan that should be in a hard copy that's physical, that you can access if you don't have access to your digital assets.
That's super important. All right. All right, so excuse me for a moment. All right. I'm trying to get a few more people into this event here, so apologies for the interruption there. All right, the activation. So once we've activated the business continuity plan, and maybe you have the alternate facility, or everyone's working from home, which is more reasonable now that we've gone through a work from home stage. And once you've got your critical business functions reestablished, computer services restored to all the critical departments, you're going to notify and build the assembly of the recovery teams, implement the interim procedures that are defined in the plan, relocate to the secondary location, and reestablish data communications. Now, one thing to think about here is the people involved as well. Your IT team in a situation like this is going to probably be extraordinarily busy. So you're going to want to make sure that you have all the information necessary to help do some of this stuff. Know who to call, where to call, and who the providers are of the equipment that you're going to be restoring. So be aware of that potential risk and time. So, and that brings up another topic that we'll talk about in the next slide, which is your RTO and RPO. The section 3 in the recovery plan is also the alternate site operations. So the primary recovery activities during this phase are backlog reduction. If you've got lots of orders or projects to do and you've been down for a couple of days, and the procedures necessary to alternate and facilities and change facilities. So, and then the last thing is getting back to normal, transitioning back to the primary site. Okay, all right. So one of the most important things is the team. So in the case of one of the Japan Takeda earthquake things that I read about, was the fact that some of the business owners or decision makers were not able to get to work or communicate, or maybe in the hospital, who knows what. So what they had done was they had given the tools to recover in the plan to a number of different people in the organization so that they could delegate that and get the business back up and running without the ownership or the decision makers to do it. So being able to delegate that is important. Also, it's super important to write out each step of the plan and assign responsibilities to the employees who it's responsible to in clear and simple language. We don't want it to be too complex. We want it to say, hey, you need to call this person or this company and restore this and make it available in this way. Having that as part of your business continuity plan, once you kind of know how that would happen and you visualize that, is going to save you so much heartache, because once again, disasters don't work in a perfect way. So the people who are the decision makers need to share that information. In that disaster recovery and business continuity plan, there should be a list of phone numbers and addresses so that you can be sure to get in touch with the key people. Like I said, the key vendors, suppliers, landlords, internet carriers, phone carriers, insurance companies, insurance agents, etc. And lastly, deciding on a communication strategy to prevent loss of customers. So you're going to want to make sure that you let your customers and your vendors know and how you're going to continue to communicate with those vendors and customers. So this is kind of a short list, and this is in the paperwork that's on the website that, and the link that I sent out to everybody, which I will send out again before the end of this. The key contacts are going to be the IT people in particular, hopefully Zephyr Networks in this case. People near the server room, landlords, power companies, telecom, the data recovery service, if it's a company, the software, or what we recommend, which is a BCDR appliance, a backup business continuity and disaster recovery appliance. You'll want to know your information and your account information for that so that you can help restore the data, and different hardware server suppliers and your email services supplier. And then among your team in particular, you're going to want to set up a call tree or some other way of notifying your team. So in that worst case scenario, you start off with the first person and then contact the next one. And in the case of a major disaster, oftentimes texting is going to be the better way to communicate. It doesn't take as much resources, and from my understanding, it will work better in a disaster situation than the alternative, which would be a full phone call. So building a phone tree on who calls who will help your company get back to work. And that kind of covers pretty much what we were going to discuss. I wanted to go over a little bit about how that would work in a cloud situation as well, considering most everybody is using a Microsoft 365 or an ERP in the cloud these days and having that conversation. Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace, a lot of these other ones actually do the business continuity part for you. They don't have a shared responsibility for that. We are trusting them to be able to restore, and they do have the resources for managing that.
But remember that restore that they're talking about is their services, not your data.
Right.
Your data
exactly.
is a shared responsibility. So you need to figure out in a disaster, which could be a security breach or encryption, what is your plan for that?
Right. And so there are tools available that we would be happy to talk to you about, which will actually back up that data and make sure that it's in a secondary location that is accessible if something does happen major to your carriers like Microsoft 365 or Google. All right. So then other than that, in particular, we can help you with your business continuity plan. There's a lot involved in the business continuity plan. So I recommend that you look at the resources that we did send to you and that I will re-put in the webinar chat. So please check on that. And I just sent that out to everybody again. And we'll record this and put this on the channel as well, on the YouTube channel. So when you guys get the opportunity, I would really recommend you going through that, but call us. We can help you through this process. It is not overly complex, but it is certainly worth doing in order to prevent the worst case scenario from happening to your business. And aside from that, Eric, do you have any other thoughts or notes?
Just some thoughts on this is a little bit of planning goes a long way, because it does turn into absolute chaos. And if there isn't a plan, it's much more painful. Yeah.
One thing that I think you and I both know a lot about is discuss the advantages of a full appliance. I keep talking about it, a business continuity and disaster recovery appliance. Eric and I, before the webinar started, were talking about what it was like back with the old backup exec type software, ArcServe, the traditional ways of backing up, going back to tape and restoring from tape, and how much time it took. Assuming it's costing you $1,400 a minute for downtime, advantages of a full appliance to be able to restore applications, full servers as a one chunk compared to what it was back in the old days is not only time saving, it is also transformative in your ability to restore in a major disaster. I talked about it earlier, be able to restore in the cloud, even if you have a local server. If Eric remembers just as well as I do what the stress was and how much time it took to restore in those situations, both of us have had experience with it. So if you're not using a BCDR appliance, a business continuity appliance that has the ability to do this, I recommend you call us right away or call somebody right away and ask about it. It gives you so many more tools and so much more security in those backups than anything that really existed prior to the appliances.
So there's a couple of questions here. One about a BCR or BCDR template and what should be covered in that. And then the other one is kind of in line with that question is everything on Microsoft servers backed up on a Datto? So your appliance is going to do a system image backup. So what it will allow you to do is to restore that exact same server up and running within minutes. So everything is covered in that image. And it also allows you to replicate to a cloud infrastructure that will allow you to spin up those servers in the cloud, also in case of loss of equipment, theft, fire, or destruction of that equipment. So when we deploy or onboard a backup disaster recovery plan appliance, we make sure we inventory everything that is necessary for your business and make sure it's covered in that plan and in that appliance.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually. That's excellent. So anyway, next steps for you in particular is to start off, check out the website we put together in our blog area, and start talking to your employees and your team about how you would respond in the case of a disaster. And I know that we talk about it in our office all the time, and happy to work with you guys on all of these kind of things. So
Mark, there's one more question here.
Yep.
Someone's asking, is there a downside of creating a plan? Are you opening yourself up to liabilities if you have a plan and it doesn't work? We are not lawyers, nor do we claim to be lawyers. My concern would be the health, safety, and wellness of my employees, my company, and my clients. And I would also, the opposite of that question, is there liability of not having a plan, right? If you don't have a plan and you put your clients or your company or your employees at risk because you don't have that plan, what does that look like? So definitely some good topics to have with your board of directors and your trusted advisors. I would rather have a plan personally, and we do have a plan, versus not.
yeah, I mean, I think the liability wouldn't matter if the company is not able to stay in business. So having resiliency, business resiliency, to me seems to be the most important thing. One other thing that I seem to skip over this slide, but this is a 10-minute TED Talk from a gentleman from Japan, Takashi Matachi, who had a very, very simple kind of disaster recovery conversation on this one. And he was also one of the ones who talked about empowering your team to make the smart decisions. So I really, really highly recommend this little TED Talk. He talks a lot about the Kaizen, which is the continuous improvement. And he talked about how his companies, or the whole country of Japan, focused on making small improvements and continuously think about improvements. And one of the results of that was the bullet trains in Japan were set up with the early warning earthquake detectors. And so when the big earthquake hit, all of those bullet trains had about 70 seconds before the major shock hit. And they all slowed the trains down to a safe place and stopped them so that they, by default, they were designed to do that after that. And I thought that was a great instruction and a great example of ways that we could all work towards improving our business continuity resilience.
So one more clarification on the Microsoft question that we have is everything on Microsoft servers backed up with the data. There's two different areas that we're talking about. If we have on-site Microsoft servers versus Microsoft 365 Cloud or Azure data. So those are, Datto has two separate solutions for each one of those, and they both need to be covered. One Datto appliance won't cover the cloud solutions, and the cloud solutions of won't cover your local resources. So there are two different solutions or two different parts to that solution of disaster recovery of your data in the Microsoft environment or ecosystem. So just to make sure everyone understands that just because you have your Microsoft servers covered on site doesn't mean you have everything covered in the cloud.
Yep. That is true. I don't really have anything else to add. I'm not seeing any more of these questions, but I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation with everybody who sees this video or is listening to this webinar. So please reach out to us. I really thank everybody for joining, and we look forward to helping prepare you for the potential risks in your business's future. And with that, I wish everybody a wonderful day, and we'll look forward to talking to you in our next webinar. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.